This is the Academic Survival Podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Shandra McDonald. Statistics show that approximately 40% of students drop out of college every year. In fact, nearly 30% drop out their first year. Well, I am on a mission to improve these stats.
I feel like in college, there are times where, we want to make sure we're succeeding in, of course, our schoolwork. We want to make sure that we're succeeding in our friendships. We want to make sure we're succeeding in our extracurricular activities. If you're involved in various clubs or organizations and things like that on campus. But making sure that you prioritize yourself and your mental health, putting in practice like a self-care day. I know it's tough in college. And, sometimes we don't have the money to put in a self-care day, but
That's Bria Edgar, a school psychologist turned mental health therapist. On this episode of Academic Survival, we talk about the importance of prioritizing mental health and self-care. And she even shares tips for finding the right therapist. Join us as we explore her college journey and her path to becoming a full-time therapist. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to the Academic Survival Podcast. Today I have with me Bria Edgar, who is a school psychologist, but she's also an associate professional clinical counselor. So
Yes.
She is going to be on the show today, and we're going to hear about her academic journey as well as what she's doing in the counseling field currently. So Bria, welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm so excited to be here. So excited to talk about some of my journey.
Yes. So let's dive in. First, tell us about your school. Where did you go to college?
Okay, so I always say that my school journey is a little different than most people. So I actually went to college. This is kind of a fun fact that I always share with people whenever there's like two truths and a lie or a fun fact about yourself. But I went to college in 3 different states for undergrad, which is very random. I know.
Wow.
Very random. But I actually, when I first graduated from high school, I went straight to the University of Arizona. And that was a huge reason for that was because my dad played basketball at the University of Arizona. And it was just always a part of my life growing up. So I had always dreamed of going to the University of Arizona. But then I went there and it was not for me. Did not like it.
How long were you there before you realized it wasn't
I
for
was
you?
only there for 1 semester before I realized it was not for me. And I think that was good for me at that time because, if I were to have stayed there for 2 years and then I decided it wasn't for me, then it maybe would have been not the best. But I was, only there for 1 semester. And then I decided, my family and I kind of made the tough decision. It wasn't an easy decision at that time. And I was a little bit, because it was also very expensive. There's a lot of other factors, but ultimately it wasn't for me. And so then I came back to California, which is where I grew up, and I went to Mount Sac, which is a community college, and it was a really great in-between for me as I was transitioning from one 4-year university to another, since I did want to go to a 4-year university. And I ended up, as I was at Mount Sac, visiting the school in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is Oral Roberts University.
Okay.
And I know, whenever I tell people I went to school in Oklahoma, they're like, wait, what? Why? Usually my California friends.
Whenever I think of Oklahoma, I think of Oklahoma red dirt.
Oh, yeah, the dirt is very red there. But yeah, so it was pretty much, it was an interesting way I ended up there, but I had a family member that also had gone there. And I was convinced to go visit on a college weekend, which this is a lot of people that went to ORU, my school, their story. But I went to college weekend and I fell in love with the school. My faith was a big part of my life, or it still is a big part of my life growing up. And I felt like I knew that this was a place I could, really grow in my faith while also growing in my education journey, of course. So I ended up going to Oral Roberts University, and I was there for 3 years, and I graduated on time, which was amazing. I had an amazing experience with the staff. I had various mentors there, and I grew, like I said, a lot in my faith journey. I went on 2 missions trips through my college, actually, to India and
Wow.
also Malawi, Africa. So that was a really great time for me that I
Wow.
personally don't know if I would have gotten a similar experience at any other school. So I definitely think that I really appreciated my time there. So yes, I really enjoyed my time while I was at Oral Roberts University. And then after, right before I actually went to India on my missions trip, I applied to, or I, yeah, I applied to Azusa Pacific University out here in California
Hmm.
for their school psychology graduate program. And so after I applied to that program, I didn't hear from them back right away, but I ended up finally hearing from them when I got back from my trip. And I interviewed, and then I finally got into the school just a few weeks before school started. So after I ended up getting into the school, I ended up attending, and I graduated in the 3 years that is allotted. And then after that, I have now been a school psychologist for 5 years. And then one thing that I also did, which I did a lot of schooling, but while I was while I was in school to be a school psychologist, I also kind of wanted a backup plan because school psychology is a really demanding field, and
Hmm.
so I knew I wanted a backup plan. Um, I did extra coursework to also be able to become a mental health therapist. So the coursework that I did basically was gave me a little bit more focus in mental health and clinical work, and I did that in my last year. So I am currently kind of transitioning also into being a therapist, mental health therapist, which is why I have my APCC now. But I do have to get my hours separately than I got my hours for school psychology. So that is currently the journey that I am on now, where I'm kind
Okay.
of continuing in my education as I'm building my hours to be a licensed therapist.
Oh, great. Oh,
And yeah,
that's fantastic.
yeah.
So I have a couple questions about your three different schools. So when you were at University of Arizona, and then when you went to Oral Roberts University, like what were the differences for you that made you realize this is a better fit versus where you
Hmm.
were?
That's a great question because I feel like there are multiple differences.
Mm-hmm.
One of the main things that I always say is University of Arizona
Mm-hmm.
is a very big school. I can't remember the amount of people that were there at the time, but it was a significant amount of people. And I want to say it was literally it was like 10 times as big as Oral Roberts University,
Oh,
the school
wow.
that I ended up
Mm-hmm.
at. I really want to say there was like 30,000 to 40,000 people at University of Arizona. And then at Oral Roberts University, there's 4,000 in attendance.
Wow.
So for
That's a huge
me,
difference.
it's a very big difference. For me, just knowing what I needed in my education, and I was never a straight A student, especially not until probably about the end of high school. I did do pretty well, like my last couple years of high school after being an avid and getting a lot of support, but I needed much more individualized instruction. Like if I was in a lecture hall, I was not going to be focused. But
Mm.
if I was in a classroom with 30 people, we were able to kind of have discussions and really have that hands-on experience to my learning, then I would do much, much better. So
Yes.
I knew when I went to University of Arizona that I wasn't going to be able to succeed as well when I was in some of those very large classrooms, things like that. And that was a huge factor in my transition. Also, the diversity. The
Mm-hmm.
diversity was pretty it was not as diverse at University of Arizona for my experience, which shockingly, at the school that I ended up in Oklahoma was much more diverse than the University of Arizona.
Huh.
Um, yeah, it was the school that I went to actually had people from all over various nations too represented. Um, Many people don't know who Oral Roberts is, but Oral Roberts was a televangelist. He's considered one of the first televangelists. And there are people that came to his school from all over the world. So I met people. I had friends that were from Costa Rica, or friends that were from Zimbabwe, and friends that were from the Bahamas. I had various friends from a ton of different locations, and so Oral Roberts was a little bit of a better fit when it comes to the diversity. It wasn't, of course, everything's perfect
Mm-hmm.
for sure, but it definitely had a little bit more of those two things that I really needed.
Mm.
Much more diverse group while also having much more better classroom environments for myself.
Wow, so you mentioned some really key things there. So as far as, current freshmen, just recognizing what's a good fit for you, you know?
Yeah.
And then with your major being psychology, tell me about that choice, and how did that play in
Yeah.
being at that institution, you know?
Yeah. So when I first started school, I just always found psychology to be so interesting. When I was in high school, I took a psychology class my senior year. And after I took that class, I knew that it was something I wanted to major in because there was just so much information. And then, really, I mean, there's so many ways you can go after majoring in psychology. Sometimes people say it's too broad, but for me, it was perfect because I really just got to understand a little bit of how our minds work. I was so interested in various mental health issues too at the time. I took an abnormal psychology class and in one of my first year, I believe, at Oral Roberts University, and that class really helped me to understand, like, hey, there's certain physical issues we go through, and that's recognized, like heart disease or high blood pressure and things like that. But when it comes to mental health issues, sometimes it's not thought as the same,
Mm,
which it is, of course. I mean, when your brain isn't functioning properly or there's things that are not firing your brain at times that they're supposed to, then there are things that might impact you in some of your day-to-day living skills. So after I learned about that, I really just wanted to, I loved that focus and just
mm-hmm.
being able to, really see how someone's brain works and how we can use really various coping skills and, certain things to kind of process through some of those issues, just like we would with like medication or something like that if we were to have high blood
Right,
pressure. So I thought
right.
that was so interesting when I was in college, and that was kind of what made me kind of solidify my decision.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't really solidified for sure right away in college, but it did solidify, of course, before like my junior year or so, after I kind of took some of those classes. And yeah.
Yeah. So, based upon, your experience and what you know now, are there
Hmm.
any mental health tips that you might recommend for college students or college freshmen?
Yeah. When I think of my own journey when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to my mental health in college was a tough time. College is not an easy time, and that's something that I think a lot of people we kind of forget that college is not easy. And I think a lot of our students that are in college nowadays, sometimes they'll be going through things and having certain experiences depending on, their tough caseload or workload, while also having a lot of social obligations.
Mm,
And yeah, I don't think we give them the credit for how difficult some of that is. So I definitely have so many tips, but one thing that I definitely would want to say is prioritize yourself for sure.
hmm,
I feel like in college, there are times where, we want to make sure we're succeeding in, of course, our schoolwork. We want to make sure that we're succeeding in our friendships. We want to make sure we're succeeding in our extracurricular activities. If you're involved in various clubs or organizations and things like that on campus, but making sure that you prioritize yourself and your mental health, putting in practice like a self-care day. I know it's
mm.
tough in college, and sometimes we don't have the money to put in a self-care day, but you don't need to have the money to put in a self-care
So
day.
what
I
does
know.
that, so what does that, so okay, I want to back up to prioritizing self. What does that look like?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the first things that I always think of is, well, I like I said, self-care, but
Okay.
also checking in on yourself to know when you need to do that. So really, maybe, I mean, when it comes to prioritizing yourself, have a time throughout the week that you don't have anything scheduled where you're able to
Mm,
kind of do something that is of interest for yourself. Also, if you're somebody that needs times with friends or needs time with your family, scheduling a time during your week to do that so you can remind yourself of what the purpose is for why you're there and what you're in what you're doing. And I mean, there's various types of college students. There's those that are commuters, there's people that are living on campus. And I think there's, so many different experiences while you're in college.
Mm-hmm.
But just remember that no matter what that is, to make sure that whatever is difficult for you, that you're actually trying to find time to, yeah, remember what your purpose is and why you're doing what you're doing.
I like
So,
that.
yeah.
Especially scheduling yourself and like checking in with yourself. I
Mhm.
find that literally setting aside a day where your name is literally on your calendar so
Yeah.
that you can feel comfortable saying no, I'm booked that day.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy to forget, and it's very easy to allow someone else's needs. For some people, it's very easy to allow someone else's needs to crowd out, the time that you have for yourself.
Yeah.
If it's not literally blocked out on your calendar.
Yeah. And I think that was something that I really had a hard time with while I was in school.
Hmm.
As I've, grown older, I've done a much better job with that. But I know that when I was in school, I would definitely work out a lot on campus because I had access to the gym.
Hmm.
And that time, just being able to walk on the treadmill or just be able to take a walk outside just by myself to be able to remember. And like for me too, prayer was a big part of my journey. So to spend time by myself to do what I needed to do to make sure I was able to refocus.
Yeah.
And also like recognizing like what do you need to help yourself refocus. So for some people it might be prayer, for some people it might be journaling, for some people it might be taking time to, like I said, meet with friends or family to kind of just check in with them, and for them to check in with you, and for you to check in with yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you talked about going to the gym and scheduling
Mhm.
that time, like, exercise is definitely a good tool for
Yeah.
mental health.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I did was I literally took classes that were in the physical education, physical education courses, so
Yes.
that I had to go, like I had to work out. So I enrolled in an aerobics class because I was like, hey, I'm gonna I'm gonna use some of my tuition,
Yeah.
to actually take these other classes. And so I took a semester of aerobics, and then when I tried to
Hmm.
take it and then when I tried to take it again, it was like, you already have credit for this class. So like you can't really take it again. But I was able to do what's considered like auditing the class, which means that I don't recall if I had to still pay for it, but
Mm.
basically it's taking the class but not having
Not
to get a
having
grade for it,
it.
which
Yeah.
meant I didn't have to take the exam. So literally, I took aerobics when I was in
Mm.
college. I took karate. I did weight training. I tried to make sure that I added a PE class
Yeah.
as part of my semester workload.
Yeah, when I was in school, actually, it was a requirement for us to take a PE class every
Oh,
semester.
oh
Yes,
wow.
it was a requirement. So I definitely actually worked out a lot more in college. I need to work out more now, but we had to, because it was a grade for me to make sure that I was consistent and in the class, and also we would have a final at the end of the year. Or at the end of every semester, where we would have to run a mile.
Hmm.
And so honestly, studying and doing homework, instead of doing that, I'd have to like, okay, let me go to the gym so I can make sure that by the end of the semester I'm able to run this mile or to walk this mile in a decent amount of time. So
Wow.
yeah, it was a requirement for my college, and I think that that really helped me understand the importance of not only our mental health, of course, but for our mental health to be strong, sometimes that means also working on our physical health. And to the feeling that you get after working out and making sure that you're active, it really, I mean, it does make a difference. Sometimes, we hate to say it, but exercise makes a difference in your mental health. It really
It
does.
really does. There would be times
Yeah.
when I was just trying to solve a problem, right? A
Hmm.
life problem. And I tell you, a couple trips around the track, and I'm like, I know what I'm gonna do now.
Yeah. Yeah, same. Honestly, it helps it kind of just helps everything to kind of run a little bit more smoothly and to release some of the chemicals in your brain to actually kind of really, I just have think on a little bit more of a clearer mind, which is great.
So when you talk about self-care, what can you share with us some of your self-care practices?
Yes, of course. I think I mean, right now at the stage of my life, I have a
Uh-huh.
dog.
Uh-huh.
And one of my biggest self-care things, well, one of the biggest parts for me that I kind of make sure I'm implementing in my week, and honestly, most days, is walks with my dog. Also, too, when I say checking in with myself, and sometimes, like I said, for certain people, that could be different. I do not like journaling. I don't like really writing, but I do. I don't like it. I've never really liked journaling, but I know that that's worked for a lot of people. For myself, it's more so like verbal processing with my friends and my family.
Mm.
So at the end of every workday, I definitely have a friend, someone that I want to call and check in with and just see how they're doing, because I really do like to hear from my friends and how um, they're able to kind of check in with me, and then I'm able to check in with them, and sometimes they're able to kind of call things out in me maybe that I'm not even noticing.
Mm.
Yeah, and then of course too, I do have a therapist I meet with monthly at this time, so that also really helps me. Of course, being able to check in with a therapist, um, and prioritize some of those needs that I might have, when it comes to my own mental health. Of course,
Yeah.
and then of course too. I mean, there's, especially in college, but in any time of your life, there's so many things that you really should try your best to implement on a daily basis. No matter what, however much you can. One thing that we all struggle with is maybe sleeping a good amount of time. For me, yeah, for me, when I'm not sleeping well, I am not performing well. So I really try to make sure I'm getting a good enough sleep every night. And this is for myself. Some of the things that I have to implement just to make sure that I'm able to function as my best self throughout um, every day. So yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Let
and
me I'm sorry, go ahead. What were you about to say?
no, I was gonna say one
Oh
more
no, go
thing that
ahead.
I meant for myself. Um, One thing that I always would get so frustrated with when my therapist would check in with me, and when I'm having a hard time with, if I'm really stressed or overwhelmed, just stopping to actually breathe and think like, hey, is this really the worst? Whatever's going on in my life, is this the worst it could be? Is it realistic that I'm going to get through this problem? Is it realistic that I'm going to be able to overcome the situation? And for me, just being able to stop and really process and think, what am I going through? Is my reaction that I'm having appropriate at this time? And of course, every reaction is valid. And but of course, knowing that there are always next steps for you to get through some whatever situation you're going through. And even if it seems like there's not, just being able to just have a mechanism to calm yourself down and learn how to cope in that moment. That's one thing I definitely implement on a daily basis, because let's be real, there's things that I experience and that I'm sure everybody experiences every day that are a little stressful. So, yeah.
This is so good. Like,
Uh,
so first of all, you said a lot there. So, verbal processing, I think is
mhm.
something that I do, but I didn't realize that that's what I was doing until you said that.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, verbal processing. So that's a thing. Yay.
Yeah. So that's,
Now, I knew about sleep. I
yeah,
completely knew about sleep. And let me tell you, I have a really bad, oh gosh, how do I want to say this? The difference between me sleeping, getting the proper amount of sleep and not is huge. It's like genius level huge. I
it's
am
same for
not
me.
I am not the same person.
Yeah.
I can wake up and literally rapid fire process. Like I can almost, I say this jokingly, I can answer your question before you ask it. Like I am, I am on it. But
Yeah.
when I haven't had sufficient sleep, I can't even really like just getting ready for work in the morning, like
Mhm.
figuring out like, okay, well, what do I need to do now? Like, what's next? Oh, I think I should wash my face. Like, I can't even get my routine down right when I don't
Yeah.
have sufficient sleep. And one really scary story is, they say that like when you don't have enough sleep, that it's equivalent to being drunk.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yes,
we call
I've
it like
heard about.
sleep drunk. And I
Yes.
remember I experienced my very first all-nighter was when I was in my doctoral program. I went through
Oh.
bachelor's and master's, not ever having to do an all-nighter. I had to pull an all-nighter in my doctoral program, and that was like literally up I mean, it's an all-nighter, so obviously I was up all night. But when I got in the car to drive to campus, my brain wasn't functioning right, and I clearly remember confusing my rear view mirror with my side view mirror and not realizing that the car that I thought was behind me was actually next to me and
Oh
was
no.
getting ready to change lanes on and I don't know what got my attention. I don't know if they honked at me or what the deal was, but I was like, oh, this is dangerous. Now I understand like why they compare it to being drunk. I just couldn't process just
Yeah.
the different mirrors.
Yeah.
So
And
yes.
I was definitely the same. I took definitely had some all-nighters in college. They were not good for me at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
Again, that's why though it's important to make sure you're, prioritizing your time well so you don't have to do those things.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
saying no to certain things so you don't have to do those things.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then, so you said verbal processing, sleeping, and then breathing, like,
Yes.
and taking that time to
Mm-hmm.
ask the questions and like, is this an
Yeah.
appropriate response?
Yeah.
Is a good one.
And sometimes when I say, is it appropriate response, people are like, well, maybe it's not. But don't invalidate what you're feeling too, because it's important to feel whatever emotions you need to feel, of course, depending on what you're going through. But then after you kind of experience that, depending on what situation you're in, take the best next step that you feel like would be appropriate then. But actually stopping to think and being like, okay, what what I'm feeling is valid, what I'm feeling is okay, but now I need to, move on and let's try to finish this assignment,
Yeah.
or deal with this conflict I'm having with my roommate or my friend. So, yeah. And when I say breathing too, it's one of my favorite things to remind people of because we all know how to breathe, right? But do we really know how to breathe? That's what I say to my students that I work with and some of my clients. Do we really know? And people are very surprised the difference. And like, yeah, when I really realized how I need to just stop to breathe, it made such a difference in their life. And I say the same thing for myself. So when I say that, I want to give an example.
Okay.
When I say that too, is like if you are experiencing a lot of anxiety or stress, and you feel like you can't really think clearly, and you just need time to kind of recenter yourself. I always recommend just stopping to take like a mindful moment in your day and just sometimes I search up mindfulness videos online, or if you just on your own want to take 10 deep breaths. And the way I do that is I breathe in through my
Like
nose for four
walk me
seconds.
through it. Walk me through it.
Yeah, I
I'll do
can.
it
Okay.
right now. Let's do
I'll do
it.
it right now. Okay.
Okay.
Right. So what I would say, say with my client if I'm having to walk them through, I'd say, okay, so we're going to take a mindful moment
All right.
and I want you to close your eyes
Okay.
and we're just going to really quickly take 10 deep breaths, um, which we'll probably do a little less than 10 right now. But
Okay.
I would say breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds. Ready? Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Hold it. And out. 2, 3, 4. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. And hold it. And breathe out. 2, 3, 4. So I do that a lot of times throughout my day. And not a lot. I shouldn't say it a lot, but I definitely will take like 2 deep breaths a lot during my day. But sometimes I will do the full 10 if I'm really having a hard time, which is, I mean, good. But then sometimes too, if you want to go on YouTube and find like mindfulness moments so you can just take that time to really have that pause in your day, calm yourself down, recenter, and then move on.
I love
Yeah.
it. I love it.
Yeah.
I can. I'm gonna. I'm joking. I'm joking when I say this, but I'm gonna try this in my next staff meeting. Like,
Yeah. Do it. Honestly. search mindfulness moments or whatever you need to kind of calm yourself down. And then it's always so relaxing. It could be an excuse to just like, you can have an excuse during your day, like, excuse me, don't talk to me. I'm taking a moment to myself right now. So I definitely think it's great to implement.
Okay, so verbal processing, sleeping, and breathing. That's great. Now,
Yeah, that's
what?
for myself. But of course, I think it's important for everybody to figure out what works for them too, of course. So some people, like I said, journaling does not work for me because I don't, well, it just has never worked, but it might work for another person. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you did mention that you had a therapist. And so I would like to know from you, like any tips for college students if they're looking for a therapist, you know, like how did you find someone that worked for you? Like how do you know
Yeah.
that's a good match?
That's a really, really good question. For me, I have Kaiser for my insurance. So I got lucky because the person that they placed me with was good. And I only meet with them like monthly. I might move out to somebody different, but I do have that option. You always have an option to switch, and you should remember that if you're not clicking with your therapist, it should be okay to request someone different. Depending on your insurance, of course, you might have to make sure you find somebody that's in network and that your insurance will cover, or if you wanted to just pay private pay, which is basically means you're paying somebody directly instead of going through your insurance. That is always an option too. But remember that you should try your best to find somebody that you feel comfortable with, ultimately. That is definitely should be your main priority when you're looking for a therapist. There's usually, if you're going through like a private practice, you can sometimes call just to kind of do an initial, just like check in to see if you guys click or if you're clicking with that person. And again, like I said, though, depending on your insurance, some of those things might be a little bit difficult. I know, yeah, I just know that no matter what, you should be able to kind of prioritize yourself in choosing a therapist and prioritizing what your needs are in a therapist too.
That's great.
So yeah.
So up till now, I've been asking you questions about like general advice for college students.
Yeah.
I have some specific questions about students who are psychology majors and
Yeah.
want to get into either being a school psychologist or, like you say, you right now, you have your APCC.
Yes.
So, any tips for those types of students who want to follow the steps that you have taken?
Yeah. I know I say this every question you ask, but that's a good question. I I definitely I think it's important no matter what field you go into to actually speak to a person that's doing that job. And maybe if you can speak to multiple people. When I became a school psychologist, I did not really speak to many people that were school psychologists. And I do kind of wish I did, and also wish that I would have spoken to therapists. And when you're in college, you really start to learn what your work habits are too, and what you really appreciate, like what classes you like, and try to really think about those things that you like in your classes, things that you have in your work habits that you want to have in a future job, and prioritize that when you're looking for a job. So being a school psychologist for me has been an amazing experience. I've been able to work with so many different students with disabilities, in special education, while also doing counseling, and also crisis intervention and prevention in my school, and the schools in my district. It has been such a great experience for me. But I will tell you, it's been a little bit tough. Being a school psychologist was a little tough for me. Um, I think a lot of it has to do with, I didn't realize as many assessments I would have to do, or instead of being able to work directly with students. But then there's those that are in my field that are also school psychologists that is like, this is exactly what they knew they were coming into, and it worked perfectly for them. I wanted to work a little bit more one-on-one with students and clients. So that's also why, I did the backup plan while also I was able to become a therapist, so I can have that one-on-one patient and therapist experience, I guess. So that's what my next step is, because I've realized that that's what I would rather want to do full time, is to kind of have that one-on-one experience a little bit more than what I'm able to do as a school psychologist. So, yeah, I would just say for any field, I would really talk to those people that are in that field and try to see, like, okay, what are some things that I really want in my future career? And how can I kind of find what works in my current life and what I'm really good at right now, and transition that into a career, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I definitely think that that's important to keep in mind. For those that are in school to be a school psychologist, I definitely would want to say to them, you got this, because it's definitely like I said, every job's tough, but especially when you're in college, it's very tough. Having to find internships and practicums, and definitely having to complete the amount of hours that you need. That's always really, really tough, but you're gonna make it through. Don't worry, you'll make it through. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be fine. And for those that are also starting to get their hours, honestly, I'm starting to get my hours, like I said, to be a therapist, even though I already did my hours to be a school psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
I just separately. Um,
How many
so
hours do you need? You're
I need
doing your hours. How many total are required?
Yeah, I need 3,000 hours to be a therapist. And then
3,000
to be a
hours?
school psychologist, I needed 350 hours, I believe. That might be wrong, but around 300, 350 hours to be for my practicum, and then 1,200 hours for my internship. So about 1,500, 1,550 hours to be a school psychologist. So I have to have a lot of hours of internship and practicum to be able to even get into these fields. So, um,
I have a quick question
yeah.
though. When you say hours, does that mean hours one on one with a client? Is that when the clock is
That's
starting?
a good question. No, so as a school psychologist, it's basically one on. So the hours that I had to get to be a school psychologist were directly working under a school psychologist, and I basically got them with the work that I did with my supervisor and my mentor at the time.
Mm-hmm.
That was accumulated by me doing assessments, also counseling groups, individual counseling with students, helping with crisis, like I said, as a school
Ah.
psychologist intern. And this is all in the education setting. So I'm working at a public school.
Mm-hmm.
And then as a therapist, for my LPCC, and I do believe it's pretty similar for if you're in California, there's also an MFT that's pretty common. And LPCC is a little bit newer in
And
California, but the hours are
LP,
pretty.
I'm sorry,
LPCC,
LPCC stands for
yeah,
what,
sorry,
license?
LPCC is license, APCC is associate.
Okay.
Associate is an intern. Yeah,
Okay, got it.
sorry, I might switch back and forth between those. But this, it's associate is an intern of an LPC for LPCC.
Okay.
And then for an MFT, American Family Therapist, and a professional clinical counselor, I know that some of the hour requirements are pretty similar, but it's 3,000 hours, and it's not directly one on one for every one of those 3,000 hours. I want to say it's about 1,200 hours or 1,500 hours, which I would double check at the Board of Behavior Sciences. You can kind of double check those things depending on the license you're seeking. But you can also get hours, the other half of those hours, through like case management or working with one on one with your supervisor to kind of get that supervision. And also, I mean, there's a lot of things you can also be doing. Like, I know that if you were working and doing presentations at certain conferences or, yeah, various base anything where you're kind of speaking and communicating with people about whatever career for or whatever field you're in, you can also get hours. So there's a lot of different ways you can get hours, but there is a big majority of those hours do have to be one on one
Okay.
with a client. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so thank you. Thank you for sharing all that information. So, now just tell me a little bit now about what's next for Bria in this field of counseling. What do you have on the
Yes.
horizon?
So, what's next for me? So, I actually, like I said, I have begun my hours to be a full time therapist. So, I am transitioning right now, actually, out of my school psychology job. Sad. I
Oh,
love working in the school setting. I love working with students and in education. But, like I said before, one of the things that I want to have more experience in is kind of that one on one with clients where I'm actually being able to do therapy, but also have some of those, just the interpersonal relationships that you can build with clients compared to in the school settings. I do work a lot more when it comes to like assessments, being able to see how I could support students, which is amazing because I love trying to help my teams figure out how we can best support our students with special needs. And our students with mental health issues in our schools. But I would love more, like I said, to kind of have that one-on-one experience. So I'm transitioning out of school psychology at the end of June, and I will be going full-time into just getting my hours full-time until I hopefully finish those in about 2 years to be licensed. But yes, a lot of what I do right now, because I have started to build some of my hours through my church fellowship, Monrovia. And I am going to possibly be moving into getting my hours under a supervisor through a private practice in the next couple months. So yeah.
Awesome. And then ultimately that would lead to you one day having your own private practice, or?
That's the goal for myself.
Okay.
That is my goal. And I love the flexibility of, whenever if I were to have a private practice, I love that flexibility. Where I'm able to take clients when I feel like I need to, or when I want to, and when would be the best for me, while also maybe still supporting in schools since I do have that expertise. And the thing is, when you're a school psychologist, again, for those that might be looking at this career, it's such a niche field that nobody else can really work in unless you have a school psychology degree. So I'm still able to kind of hopefully consult with school districts in the future because I have that understanding and expertise. But possibly having a private practice where I'm able to take clients on my own. And yeah, so I definitely too, I want to make sure that if anybody is interested in any sort of counseling or therapy, that they're able to, maybe we can add a link at the bottom of this episode just to see who they can kind of, if there's a list of referrals for therapists.
Absolutely. And if someone wants to reach you, how is that something that you can do right now, or can someone reach out to you?
Yes, I'll definitely provide you with my Instagram and my which I'm actually going through with my supervisor to make sure I provide the right Instagram, because I have to make sure there's certain criteria that must be met since I am technically under supervision right now. So is this can we put that in the description, what my link would be?
Absolutely.
So then we'll do that.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and provide that information for anybody that would want to reach out to me.
Awesome. So as we begin to close this out, is there anything that you want to share that perhaps I haven't asked? Is there just anything off the top of your head that you want to just leave as a closing comment?
Yeah. I think, because I think about this podcast being for college students specifically, and I just would love to kind of let our college students know that everything's going to be okay. It's all going to be okay, because like I said before, college is a hard time. I think it's almost like that crossroads in our life where we're trying to figure out what we want to do, what's our next step. And it feels like the end of the world sometimes when we don't think we have an answer to that. And it's not the end of the world. After college, there are still going to be experiences you have that might still change your course of whatever career you go into, or whatever things that you feel like you want to be involved in. So just continue to, like I said, prioritize yourself and your needs. And no matter what careers or whatever work you go into, that you keep that in mind. Prioritizing yourself is number one, while also making sure to keep in mind that whatever's best for you and whatever's meant for you will come through. So yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for their closing comments, and thank you for joining me today on the Academic Survival Podcast. And I just want to wish you the best in your endeavors, and if anyone needs to get in touch with you, they will have the information at the end of this podcast. So thank you so much, Bria Edgar, for joining me today.
Yes, thank you so much.
That's it for today on Academic Survival. If you want to share your story on how you survived your freshman year of college, you can reach me at info@shandramcdonald.com. We'll be back next week with more ways to survive your academic journey. Until then, happy studying.